There we go. There we go. What's up, everybody? How you doing? How you doing? Welcome to the Punk Rock Review. Hope everybody's having a good day. My day's going all right. Let's see. Boom, boom, done, done, done. Just knocking off work things. Done, done, done. Uh, yeah, man. How's everybody's day going? What is it? Monday today? Monday. So, in just a second, I'll get started here. I want to talk about some cool stuff that's going on in the world. I got some stuff happening within our lovely genre here. All right, boom. Let me get some keywords figured out here. I might be recording this one too, actually. That might actually help. I just put up a new short with my punk rock record collection series that I'm doing with the Broken Cuffs EP that I just got. It's like a new vinyl release. Pretty exciting. So very good EP, by the way. Shout out Broken Cuffs. Them's the homies. Them's the homies. Let's see, is it even live yet? I don't know. It might not be. Yeah, there it is. Yeah, okay. Cool. Yeah, so you might like it, you might not. Who knows? I can't tell anymore, dude. I don't try to figure this out. I just keep going. Let's just keep putting things on the channel. Okay. Holy crap. People be making some wild lists. 150 best punk albums of this century. From 2000s? Wait a minute. That's a 90s record, bro. Wait, no. I think it came out in 2000. I don't know. Whatever, man. Now I'm just rambling, waiting to see if we get anybody on the show with us. We might not. Who knows, dude? I can't predict these things. I'm not Mystic Mac. I'm just an old guy that listens to punk music. But yeah, in just one second, we will. I'm trying to get into the chat real fast. Make sure if you stop in that you give the stream a thumbs up so that we can hopefully get put out into the algorithm. Maybe have some people show up today and hang out for a little while we're doing this thing. I would appreciate it if you don't mind. Okay, finally ready to rock and roll. It's weird that I can't talk in the chat on this software. It's very strange. It's okay though. All right, so let's pull this down here with it. There we go. Got my stuff figured out. Okay, this is a GQ, like what, UK GQ? All right, so we're going to talk about, bam, there we go. All right, so what's up, everybody? How you doing? Welcome to the Punk Rock Review. I appreciate your time today. We're going to just celebrate punk rock turning old, all right? It is 50 years old, basically, at this point, right? So on November the 6th, I had an alarm go off on my phone, and it was like, don't forget to do the 50 years of punk live stream. But I didn't put any notes on there. I guess I just assumed I would remember what I meant. And I didn't, so I just disregarded it. I honestly thought, oh, that must have been for next year. Talk about the first release of the Ramones discography from 1976, right? And then in a live stream, somebody mentioned, oh, I'm surprised you never really mentioned the Sex Pistols' first show in 1975 on November 6th. And I was like, oh my goodness, that's what I was going to talk about that day. So we're about a week and a half late. So my apologies to anybody that really is a stickler for being on time to everything. But yeah, so November the 6th, 1975, the Sex Pistols played their first live show. So over the course of 15 minutes on a rainy November night in London's Charing Cross Road, 4 obstreperous youths with spiky haircuts and their famously troublemaking manager changed Western culture forever. This is by Paul Gorman. This came out like 10 years ago, and they were celebrating 40 years, right? So this is on the GQ UK, which is an odd magazine. talk about punk, I guess, but whatever, man. It's an article that I read a little bit of and thought this makes sense, and it tells the story pretty well. So shout out to GQ UK for doing this, and the writer of it being Paul Gorman. I want to make sure and give credit where credit is due. So it says the Sex Pistols made their live debut on the top floor common room of St. Martin's School of Art, playing before an audience of about just 20 people as support to rock and roll band Bazooka Joe, a hard-driving 50s bass act and favorite live attraction for me as a teenager, says this dude. He was born and raised not far from both guitarist and drummer of the band. That's pretty cool that he was like that close to them. Let's see. Meanwhile, their bass player, Stuart Goddard, I know who this is, went on to transform his life as Adam Ant, but at the time, he was only known as being in this band Bazooka Joe. Anyways, so let's see. So it says, ending in disarray after lead singer Johnny Rotten launched a physical attack on the PA system loaned by the headlining act. The first Pistols gig was an example of their late manager Malcolm McLaren's lifelong dedication to involvement in events which disrupted the status quo. By this time, Sex, the King's Road, boutique that was operated by him and then girlfriend Vivian Westwood, was gathering a notoriety which would attract, in his words, a generation of the dispossessed. And during the Sex Pistols performance of just a handful of songs, mostly covers that included The Monkees' I'm Not Your Stepping Stone and Substitute by The Who, as well as their own composition of a song called 17, the seeds were sown for punk to proliferate as an attitude which informs art, design, fashion, media, politics, and social activism to this day. I just think it's cool that this is 50 years, man. You think about it, like I wasn't even born yet, man. I was born in 1982. So what, 7 years later, I was born. That's wild, man. As set out by McLaren's punk's attitude is characterized by nonconformity, DIY aesthetics, and anti-corporatism. Which is strange. Never mind. It is what it is. It's alive and kicking from the defiance of Anonymous and Pussy Riot to the fertile British rap scene led by the great underground independent label High Focus. I don't know much about that. I know who Pussy Riot is and I know who Anonymous is, and both of those are very punk rock things. I'll just call them things, entities. That punk attitude is needed now more than ever. It's confirmed by the fact that the common room where the Pistols played that night is now a luxury penthouse apartment. Ooh, that sucks. That sucks. So let me go back to my original deal here, the AI overview on this. Ugh. So yeah, it says the Sex Pistols' first show was on November 6th. Okay, it only lasted 10 to 15 minutes. That's crazy, dude. It was very chaotic, very small audience of around 20 people. Oh, there was a video that I saw earlier. Hold on. This actually describes the whole thing. I forgot about this. It's on History Pod. We can listen to it together. So let's do that. It's only a couple minutes in length. So shout out History Pod channel on YouTube. This is actually from their channel. And you know what? Let me put it on the screen so they can get a little shine too. Let's see. Shit, it's going to make me do something stupid. All right, hold on. I completely forgot that I had this lined up to talk about this video on here as well with you guys. All right, here we go. I'm about to edit this later. Clip some of this crap out, huh? Okay. There we go. History Pod talks about this historic punk rock show. And then after this, I got to talk about something else for just a minute. Within regards of like the history of punk.
Welcome to History Pod. On the 6th of November 1975, the Sex Pistols played their first gig at St. Martin's College of Art in London. The Sex Pistols had developed from a band called The Strand, who'd been managed by British impresario and provocateur Malcolm McLaren. Having returned to the UK after a period working with the New York Dolls, McLaren developed the image for a new lineup, which added bass guitarist Glenn Matlock and singer Johnny Rotten to the band. The St. Martin's College gig was arranged by Matlock, who was studying there. The Sex Pistols supported pub rock band Bazooka Joe and played a few cover songs on equipment borrowed from the headliners, but the plug was pulled after just 20 minutes. The band had only played 5 songs, and their dismissal from the stage led to a short fistfight. Hazy memories of people who were there mean that there are different recollections over who exactly chose to end the set. However, everyone agrees that the Sex Pistols' performance was not very polished, but incredibly loud. The bassist with Bazooka Joe, Stuart Goddard, was the only member of the band to be impressed by the Sex Pistols. Energised by the rawness of the punk sound and image, he soon quit the band and formed a new group under his new stage name, Adam Ant. Daniel Kleinman, another member of Bazooka Joe, is now better known for designing 7 of the last 8 James Bond title credits. Despite their popularity on the pub rock circuit, Bazooka Joe failed to find commercial success and broke up soon after the St. Martin's gig. Meanwhile, the Sex Pistols went on to become one of the most influential rock bands in history.
That's crazy, dude, and accurate. I didn't realize that the Sex Pistols, or that the guy that was in Bazooka Joe, I don't know much about Adam Ant, but I didn't know that he was in that band and then saw that first show and then changed his whole life, I guess. But that's interesting, man. But yeah, the Sex Pistols are, I don't know, I've always stood firm on the fact that punk comes from the U.S. and 1976, 1975, 1974, I think even was their first show from the Ramones, right? So I think there's something to be said about where it actually comes from. I think Nitty and I are going to talk about it a little bit more in more detail tonight, and that'll come out on a video pretty soon. But it says that the Ramones played their first public show on March 30th of 1974 at Performance Studios in New York City as a 3-piece band with Joey on drums, Johnny on guitar, and Dee Dee on bass and vocals. Their first show as a 4-piece featuring Tommy on drums was later that year on August 16th at CBGB. I think that's important too, because I personally say that the Ramones is where the beginning of punk rock lies. Now, I think some people say that with the term being coined with the birth of the Sex Pistols, that matters more. I don't know. I think it's up for debate, really. I don't know that I'll stand around and argue with very many people about it for very long. I don't know. I might, though. I like arguing. But I'm going to argue with Nitty about it later, because I think we disagree on that. What's up, Megan? How you doing? But yeah, man, it's interesting that punk rock music has been around for so long. While we're talking about this, what I want to do is I want to go through and just look up some of the early punk albums and just talk about some of the earliest punk records for a few minutes, because I'm going backwards with my I don't know, my learning of this genre, right? I started out in the 90s and I just went forward for the longest time. And in the last few years, I've really gone back in time and done research and found bands that I liked or like that I didn't know that I was going to like or care about ever. But, you know, when I was young, I listened to the Ramones. I liked them. I liked the Sex Pistols. I liked the Circle Jerks, Minor Threat. I mean, that was really kind of it for the stuff pre-1990, man. I just didn't care for much of the early renditions of punk rock. But, like, you know, when you have bands like the Stooges, MC5, New York Dolls, I mean, I don't consider those bands punk. Maybe in attitude a little bit, but, like, not in sound. And when I was young, I went more for sound than I did anything. Like, that's how I described punk. That's what punk was to me. It was like freedom, my attitude, and a specific sound. So when I was young, that's what punk was to me. Whereas I get older, punk has transformed into not just those things, of course, but like it's more of an ideology. And the way I look at things now is like you can be very punk rock and play music that has nothing to do with punk. And you can be somebody that just plays punk rock music. And you're, you know, as long as your lifestyle isn't just a fabrication, then I think that falls right in line. But, you know, you don't have to play punk. You can be very punk and not play punk is my point. They're not the same thing necessarily. So being punk and playing punk aren't always, you know, together. And I've grown a lot as a fan of the the genre. I think my palette has expanded probably 5x. You know, I like The Damned, whereas for my whole life I didn't like that band. And there's still plenty of bands that I'm still trying to figure out if I like them or not. Like I really never got into the Germs. I'm trying to start listening to them some. There's only so much time in the day, and I want to listen to music I love. But I'm also trying to learn the history of this genre that I love so much. So it's like, well, I talk to people that gets me excited about bands, and sometimes I'll go back and listen to something I wasn't a fan of because I got excited talking to somebody about it. It doesn't always work out, man. It's interesting. And then some people take this stuff really personally, like this is gonna step on some toes. I don't really mean to, but I'm not gonna cower away from upsetting somebody because it doesn't matter. No matter what I do, somebody's gonna get pissed off anyway. So the UK punk fans are the hardest people that I like to talk to. Now, with that, I want to say that all the people from that part of the world that I meet and through my like live streams and most of my comments, they're like they're great, right? But it's like this little section of people from that part of the world. I think it's the old heads, if I'm honest. I think it's the old people, and then a lot of the like anarcho-punk types, which I just don't really see eye to eye with most of the time anyways. Never liked Crass. I like Conflict, but I don't know much about them. People take that so personally. It's the weirdest thing, man. It's a weird thing. But yeah, punk is important to a lot of people. And I think that the whole conversation on like gatekeeping the genre is both legitimate and kind of silly, because like at the end of the day, it's kind of dumb. Especially when you're like gatekeeping it to other people that love it. That's real stupid. It's very counterproductive. Doesn't help anybody. But when you have certain people, like I always find it funny when people want to call me like a poser, which I don't care. Call me whatever. Don't give a shit. Call me poser. But like, my first question is always like, well, what do you do? Like, what shows do you go to? Like, what bands are you in? What labels do you start? What zines do you put out? What content do you create? How do you help your community? Like, what are you doing besides sitting on the computer? Probably little to nothing. So I don't ever actually get to that point of asking that, but I always think about it. I'm like, well, what are you doing? Because, everybody goes, comments don't bother me, and I typically say that too, but, maybe a little bit, I'm only human. And I do have, a portfolio of things that I've accomplished in my life that revolve around this music and this scene and this culture. I'm very proud of that. It's not that it makes me cool at all. I'm not cool. I'm just a guy. But I'm very proud of my work that I've done. I work hard for our community. So I do take it a little personally when people tell me that I'm like a fraud or something, because I don't get it. They're just trying to be a dick, really, and they don't know me. So it doesn't really matter. But again, I'm only human. So but 50 years of this stuff is incredible. Me being only 43 years old, thinking that, man, I feel like I've been in this for a long time. But there was 20 years of this community, this culture, before I was even introduced to it. It's wild, man. I think it's amazing. It's a beautiful thing. And I think right now, in 2025, we're having another renaissance of the music, the culture, the art, and we have things to fight against. And honestly, kind of wish we didn't, but we do. It's going to breed a lot of beautiful music. It's going to have a lot of, I hope people document this right. One of the things that I think sucks is that we don't really have like video footage of the first shows. I wish we did, man. I wish we had like real good video and audio of first couple of Ramones shows, first Sex Pistols shows, first Damn shows, all the UK stuff. Here's the thing. While I stand firm on the fact that I believe that punk started in the US with the Ramones, all the stuff that I love comes from UK punk. So like I'm not saying which is better. I'm just saying like chronologically I think it started in the US. People can feel how they want about that. Let me know how wrong I am in the comments. But let's see. How do you guys feel about the bands like proto-punk stuff? I don't know. I never really considered that like punk very much. I feel like it was very much just glam. Who knows, man? Who knows? First wave of punk, mid to late 70s. We got the Ramones, Patti Smith, Television, Blondie. Again, Blondie. I feel like they're more of like a new wave band than a punk band. Talking Heads is another band that I don't really feel is that punk, but at least sonically, I'm talking sonically. But then you had like Sex Pistols, The Clash, The Damned, Buzzcocks, X-Ray Spex. All of those bands, although I don't consider the Buzzcocks a punk band. X-Ray Spex, The Damned, The Clash, and Sex Pistols very clearly. Although I think it's funny that The Clash is a band that I just recently fell in love with. I listened to them a lot when I was younger. I just didn't like them. But I got introduced in the very much the wrong way, so it is what it is. Other early bands were Black Flag, Minor Threat, Misfits, Dead Boys, The Saints. Yeah, yeah. I mean, this is all early punk stuff. It's crazy because where's the mention of like the Vibrators and the Boys? Those are the two that I like the most from the '70s. I love those bands. Both of those bands are really, really good. I don't even remember how I discovered them, but it was very late in life. I mean, it was like within the last 2 years. I was just, trying to go backwards and learn some stuff. But I try not to act like I know things I don't, because there's a ton of stuff that I don't know. There's a ton of things I do know. When you ask me about stuff I really love, there's a lot of stuff that I know. But tables of before it was punk. Ooh, what is this? Okay. Oh, they use that photo that I use all the time. That's cool. Man, that's a crazy picture of the Ramones. All these kids sitting on the stage. That's nuts. Oh, it's in Liverpool, 1977. That's awesome, dude. Okay. Punk rock emerged. This is just I'll tell you what this is. This is a strangereaction.com. I believe this is a fairly old. Yeah, December 31st. So New Year's Eve 2021. And then it was updated in May of 23, by the way. It's by Jonathan Emery. The first wave of punk is said to have lasted a mere 2 years before imploding in 1979. Yet in that short amount of time, it left an indelible mark on fashion, music, and popular culture. We look back at the early punk bands that started it all. Punk rock emerged as a reaction to the corporate music industry and the bloated dinosaur rock of the 1970s, a sound characterized by long, self-indulgent soloing and slickly produced albums that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars and sometimes years to record. That is true and kind of dumb. But punk rock aimed to change all of that, challenging the status quo by stripping rock music down to its bare essentials and demonstrating that anyone could pick up a guitar, start a band, play concerts, and record music. Punk rock aspired to reclaim rock and roll music from the greedy clutches of record company executives and put it back in the hands of the people. In this beginner's guide to punk rock, we'll be taking a look at the music and musicians who influenced the early punk bands and artists of the first wave of punk that arose almost simultaneously in the late 70s, New York and London, and the major artists of those two competing scenes. Let's go ahead and dig in. Okay, so we got, before it was punk, we got punk rock, proto-punk, 1967 to 1965. And this is just a list of bands, mind you. So we've got MC5, Iggy and the Stooges, the Velvet Underground, New York Dolls, and then Death as an honorable mention. I never understood the mentioning of Death as like a early punk band. They've got 2 or 3 songs on their album that sound remotely like they could be classified as punk, but they just sound like rock and roll to me. They're not fast enough, but man, they're fast enough. Okay, let me say that they got a couple of songs that could be categorized as punk to me sonically, right? Now I'm not going into their lyrical content. I'm just speaking on like what I hear when I listen to it, right? But it's funny because I think, yeah, whatever. Their sound just doesn't sound like punk to me, but it's cool. They're a good band. Objectively good. What's up, Mo Tracy? Joey got his influence from The Who and all that sort. I only know because I would get Christmas gifts with all these books that I didn't want to know about. Bro, come on, man. You gotta read. I try to read sometimes. I don't read a lot. I need to read more. But I typically like to read for entertainment, which messes up stuff like this. But I got a few punk books that I've been digging into lately. We'll get there, man. Dude, look, whatever. I know what I know, and I learn how I learn, and I love this stuff. And that should be very obvious to everybody. The first wave of punk rock from New York, 1974 to 1979. Patti Smith, Television, Ramones, Blondie, Talking Heads, Richard Hell and the Voidoids, The Dictators, The Dead Boys, Suicide, The Heartbreakers. See, like some of these bands I don't consider punk either. Like Blondie, dipping her toe in it. Patti Smith, maybe in spirit but not in sound. But this is the thing. This is the first wave of it. It's just kind of, the sound isn't really the sound yet, you know? And then the other first wave of punk in the UK from 1975 to 1979. You got the Sex Pistols, Buzzcocks, a band that I stand firm on is not a punk band. The Clash, The Damned, X-Ray Specs, Adverts, The Vibrators, there we go, Eater, Wire, and The Stranglers. Wire I'm a little weird on too, but my opinions don't really matter much, so it doesn't matter. Whatever. People are going to be like, you're dumb. Let's see. I didn't know they didn't like each other. Wait, speaking about who? Did I just read that and I don't even remember what I read? What did I miss? Did I read something and don't even realize what I read? Who didn't like each other? So it says here, before it was punk rock, proto-punk. The origin stories of nearly every first wave punk rock band include an eerily similar tale of how their founding members connected with like-minded miscreants over a shared interest in particular kinds of music, such as the so-called garage rock of the 1960s to mid-70s, compilations like Nuggets, original artifacts from the first psychedelic era, 1965 to 1968. They're often cited as being heavily influential on early punk. Alongside compilations like Nuggets were a handful of early 70s bands that operated well outside the mainstream music industry that made each their own unique contribution to the birth of punk rock. MC5. Oh, this could be a long video if we want it to be. Coming from the Motor City, Detroit, MC5 were a revolutionary rock band in many ways, combining fierce, almost militant left-wing politics with loud, fast, aggressive music. MC5 took 1950s rock and roll and supercharged it with overdriven guitars and ear-splitting volume. Wayne Kramer's distinctive guitar playing, a mix of power chord riffing and tasteful solos, would be copied by rock guitarists, punk or otherwise, for years to come. Aside from speed, volume, and attitude, MC5's most notable contribution to punk rock was infusing social and political commentary with rock and roll music. You can trace a direct line from the politically charged lyrics of The American Ruse to God Save the Queen by the Sex Pistols or London Calling by the Clash. Recommended track would be Kick Out the Jams. Also, yes, I would recommend that track. Kick Out the Jams is a bop. Love it, dude. Jesse Martinez, how about the West Coast first wave of punk? I mean, we're specifically talking about a date and time right now, 1975, but are you referring to like hardcore stuff or what? Give me some examples. I may not know. I may not even be on the same wavelength as you. Talk to me like I'm a third grader, because I basically am. Punk history is something that I'm in the middle of trying to learn more about. So let me be clear about that. I'm learning this, like I'm talking about it and learning about it at the same time. I know a little bit, but I'm not I wouldn't qualify to teach anything. That's why I'm reading this stuff. I love Kick Out the Jams though. I mean, the first time I heard that song was actually the Presidents of the United States of America covering it. And then when I heard MC5's version, I was like, oh, not as good. But in hindsight, it is, by the way. Iggy and the Stooges. If MC5 gave early punk rock its political edge, then their little brother band and fellow Detroit rockers Iggy and the Stooges inspired punk rock's dangerous edge, led by frontman Iggy Pop, later dubbed the Godfather of Punk. The Stooges built on MC5's loud and aggressive sound and deployed it like heat-seeking missile with chaotic, destructive live shows where seemingly anything could happen. I know that. The chaotic elements of early punk shows were codified when Iggy and the Stooges played live. Spitting, crazy dancing, crowd surfing, broken instruments, profane stage banter, and mockery of the audience, smashed beer bottles, and even blood. If you've ever slam danced or crowd surfed during a concert, you have Iggy Pop to thank for that. Search and Destroy is their recommended track for that. The Velvet Underground, the first wave of punk rock bands centered around the CBGB's club in New York City, included a heavy emphasis on artistic expression, chaotic experimentation, and diversity of taste, style, and musical approach. Much of this tradition was inherited from the Velvet Underground. Interesting. I don't know a lot about this band. I know a fair bit about Iggy and the Stooges. I know some about MC5, but I very much never got into Velvet Underground. I heard a little bit of it, didn't care for it, never revisited it. I probably should at some point. The Velvets experimented with everything from fuzz and distortion to droning sounds and long-form songs containing spoken word, narrative, and poetry. That's what it was I didn't like about it. Primary songwriter Lou Reed was no stranger to writing songs about controversial topics like drugs, as with their groundbreaking song Heroin on the Velvet Underground and Nico. More properly an art rock or experimental rock outfit, the Velvet Underground's close relationship with artist Andy Warhol, who produced and managed them, would foreshadow the close connection between the early New York punk and art scenes. That's cool, man. Recommended track from this article is I'm Waiting for the Man. Then you got the New York Dolls, which I think, man, this band was wild. If first wave punk rock was partly characterized by sloppy novice musicianship and outrageous, sometimes gender-bending fashion, then it mostly inherited those traditions from the New York Dolls. The Dolls took the glam rock aesthetic of artists like T-Rex, Slade, and The Sweet and infused it with trashy, drugged-out vibe, all while looking as much like transvestite hookers as rock stars. Is that a word we can say these days? I don't actually know. My apologies if that offended anybody. I'm certainly not trying to do that. While the New York Dolls imploded in 1976, just as the punk scene in New York was truly taken off, their short, catchy, simplistic songs would serve as templates for up-and-coming bands like the Ramones. The breakup of the New York Dolls would also seed first-wave punk outfit The Heartbreakers with two of its members. Recommended track, Trash. Then it brings up the band Death. While they received almost no recognition or acclaim during their active years, Detroit's Death was later regarded as being a pioneering band that bridged the gap between the workmanlike Midwestern proto-punk of MC5 and the Stooges, and later first-wave punk bands like the Ramones and Dictators. Unrecognized during their time, from 1971 to 77, Death's story is one of missed opportunities. Their name didn't lend itself to commercial success, and their first single was pressed to only 500 copies. Yeah, but those are sought after today. Death's best recorded output from 1975, 7 songs recorded at United Sound Studios in Detroit, languished until 2008 when guitarist Bobby Hackney's son discovered the recordings and pushed to get them released to a wider audience. While Death didn't influence future first-wave punk bands, the point is that they should have, and probably should have been counted as one of them too. Recommended track, Politicians in My Eyes. You know, I don't know how to feel about that. Why should they have? They just didn't get... I mean, it's just fortunate that the Ramones did, right? I don't know. It's weird. Whatever. Oh, Zeros, The Illegals, X with the Germs. Fear started in the late 70s. Yeah, I'm sure those will get mentioned here in a minute, too. This video started talking about Sex Pistols' first show, though. Just a heads up. Then we got the first wave of punk. Okay, let's go. Okay. The first wave of punk rock in New York contained a wide variance in musical styles and ability. Part of the reason that the term punk rock has historically been so hard to define is due to how New York scene included bands that were polar opposites of each other in terms of sound and style, such as the Ramones and Talking Heads, or complete musical outliers such as Suicide. There really was no single unified vision behind the burgeoning New York punk scene other than a strong DIY ethic and desire for unrestrained artistic expression. Yeah, I mean, they were making the rules back then, so... making the rules, whatever. Creating a template, so I guess I should say. But a template is definitely like a... You can color outside the lines, but there's still a line there, you know? Original quote by me. Hailed as a punk poet laureate. Is it laureate? I can't read that word because I'm not educated. Patti Smith picked up the torch dropped by the Velvet Underground and ran it further than anyone could have imagined. Smith was already a published author of several collections of poetry by the time the New York punk scene was getting started. She'd also gigged as a writer for Rolling Stone and Cream magazine, but early successful experiments with setting her poetry to music steered her towards forming her own band instead of existing on the sidelines writing about music. Along with her backing band, the Patti Smith Group, she infused intelligent, heartfelt poetry, blues-inspired pub rock to create the quintessential first-wave punk rock opus 1975's Horses, which was, unsurprisingly, produced by the Velvet Underground's John Cale. Horses was an eclectic mix of free-form lyrical improvisation, set to rock music that generated immense critical acclaim at the time, but little in the way of commercial success. Iconic singles like Gloria, a Van Morrison cover, and Land of a Thousand Dances became live staples at Smith's intimate and often raucous performances, but initially failed to reach radio audiences. However, by 1978, Smith would enter mainstream consciousness with the hit single Because the Night, penned for her by Bruce Springsteen, who would also later write Hungry Heart for the Ramones to release as their own song, but eventually end up releasing it himself due to pressure from his record label. Gloria being the recommended track. Interesting. I did not know that Hungry Heart was for the Ramones initially. Hold on, I need to write that down. That's crazy. Anybody see the Springsteen movie? That's about Nebraska. That's my favorite Springsteen album. Let's see. It's funny because I know a lot of this information that I'm reading, but it's like I don't think about it often. It's weird, huh? You say you remember them for the live shows? You talking about the Ramones? I can't tell if you're being serious or not, Mo. You wacky guy. Television, often hailed as the band that kickstarted the CBGB's punk scene in New York. Television seemed to emerge as if from nowhere as a fully formed unit, though they actually came about when the short-lived Neon Boys broke up. I don't know about the Neon Boys either. Man, it's like every couple of weeks, I feel like I learn something and go, dude, I wish I'd have known that. I should know that. Sonically and aesthetically, television more closely resembled a continuation of the Velvet Underground's freeform art rock experimentation than the Stooges' bombastic nihilism. A contrast that is said to have fueled the creative differences that resulted in the eventual firing of founding bassist Richard Hell. Singer-songwriter Tom Verlaine and guitarist Richard Lloyd's dueling guitar attack made for tight, dynamic songs whose complex harmonies swelled and built and broke open like waves against rocks. The title track of their 1977 debut album, Marquee Moon, is just over 10 minutes long, but so captivating that it never feels like it. I'm not listening to a 10-minute song. I just don't like them. Verlaine's lyrics had an impressionistic quality and a poetic delivery. As on the standout track, Venus, it was a tight tour night, street so bright, the world was so thin, and between my bones and skin. Yeah, you know, it is kind of poetic, I guess. It's like prettier than a typical punk like anthem. Anyways, television's early live shows were riveting in performances that featured long improvisational. I can't read today. Featured long improv stretches filled with guitar hero. Bro, I'm making myself look stupid. Filled with guitar heroics, and that inspired the birth of quite a few of other New York bands that later became part of the growing punk scene at CBGB's. Their recommended track being See No Evil. And then we got the almighty Ramones. The Ramones are rightly credited with creating the template that would codify the instantly recognizable sound of punk rock. Short songs, loud guitars, and a breakneck tempo. Yes, their self-titled debut from 1976 defined the parameters of punk rock, with most songs clocking in at under 2 minutes, played at or near 160 beats per minute, 14 songs totaling just under 30 minutes of runtime. Love it. By stripping rock and roll down to its barest essentials, the Ramones showed that anyone could pick up a guitar and start a band, thus laying the groundwork for the DIY ethic that would characterize the 1980s punk rock scene. New bands sprang up in their wake as the Ramones toured the U.S. in the late 1970s, and their first appearance in London in July of 1976 inspired the formation of many of the first wave UK punk bands. As if all this street cred weren't enough, the Ramones' songwriting talent, most songs were penned by bassist and backup vocalist Dee Dee Ramone, is obvious in how incredibly catchy and memorable their songs were. Practically everyone heard Blitzkrieg Bop at a sporting event at least once in their lifetime. Dude, I think everybody's heard a Ramones song. I think everybody's probably heard Sex Pistols songs as well. Ramones songs are likewise ubiquitous in films and TV shows. Judy is a Punk appeared on soundtrack of the Royal Tenenbaums and Pet Sematary in the 1989 film of the same name, for starters. Despite their influence, the Ramones would never truly see commercial success during their active years, or most members' lifetimes for that matter. Their famous, mostly posthumous, and mainstream recognition of their greatness only occurred after the grunge explosion in the 1990s, when members of now platinum-selling bands like Nirvana, Pearl Jam, and Soundgarden all pointed to the Ramones as one of their strongest influences. Interesting. And their recommended track is real weird. It's Beat on the Brat. Let's go down here and see if we can get to some stuff from the UK, since that's what I was initially going to talk about anyways. Dude, hell yeah. Teenage Bottle Rocket in Vegas tomorrow? Let's go. What's up, Georgie? Yeah, television's where me and you start to veer off each other, my dude. It's all good, though. They have another band called Sack. I didn't know that. And I know a couple of those guys fairly well. I don't pay attention to side projects all the time. I don't hear about them. Man. Crazy. So much information out there. Talking Heads. It's not unreasonable to suggest that art rock owes a great deal to Talking Heads, at least as much as it owes to the Velvet Underground. Perhaps it has something to do with its members all meeting in art school. That's hilarious. Or perhaps it's because of their peculiar style and quirky observational humor. They did release an album named More Songs About Buildings and Food. That's crazy title for an album. That was 1979, by the way. Or perhaps it was their comparatively squeaky clean image in the midst of a decadent NYC music scene. Whatever it was that made them so special, the Talking Heads had it in abundance. The Talking Heads' musical experimentation expanded with each new album release as they incorporated various influences from jazz, funk, and world music into their sound. Frontman David Byrne was strange and eclectic, often wearing outlandish, oversized suits on stage and choreographing almost every dance move of the band during their live performances. While the Talking Heads began humbly as a completely minor act as CBGBs, in a few years they would be known for collaborating with Brian Eno, headlining stadiums around the world and selling millions of albums. Perhaps the apex of their creative accomplishments is having recorded the single best concert film ever conceived, 1984's Stop Making Sense. Recommended track, Psycho Killer. I stand behind that recommended track. Love that song. All right, let's scroll down. Ooh, they can talk about the Dead Boys. You know what? All right, let's go down here to the UK stuff. Okay, so it says the other first wave of punk in the UK from 75 to 79. I could do a much longer video on this later, and I very well might do a video covering this article and just do the whole thing and read it very well, take my time and put imagery up. We'll see about that. There's a lot of bands that were more punk in aesthetic than sound, and there's a lot of bands that like were more punk in like spirit than sound, where they were just real punk rock people. You know what I'm saying? This is an interesting subject and something cool to talk about since it's so, 50 years is a long time, dude. Meanwhile, across the pond from New York, punk scene centered around CBGB's, the UK punk rock scene centered around London exhibited a more homogeneous approach. Is it homogeneous? It's homogeneous. Bro, what's wrong with me today? Let me rewind that and start over. Good grief. Meanwhile, across the pond from the New York punk scene centered around CBGB's, the UK punk rock scene centered around London exhibited a more homogeneous approach to music and style. That style was decidedly less artsy and experimental and much more loud, snotty, and guitar-driven. True. Perhaps this is partly due to the fact that the London punk scene got its kickstart thanks to the Ramones' first visit to London's Roadhouse in July of '76. According to Joe Strummer of The Clash and Captain Sensible of The Damned, nearly everyone who later went on to form a notable UK punk band was in the audience at that show. Here we try to capture the spirit of the first wave of UK punk bands that released a full-length album as early as 1976 and as late as 1977. Unfortunately, this does leave out some great bands that deserve honorable mentions, which I recommend checking out once you've listened to all of the bands in this beginner's guide to punk rock. Okay, so here's the thing. Here's the honorable mentions, I guess. Angelic Upstarts started in 79. The Lurkers from 78. The Rosillos 78. Sham 69 78. The Ruts 79. Skids 79. The Slits 79. Stiff Little Fingers 79. Swell Maps 79. UK Subs 79. And Generation X 77, who featured obviously Billy Idol. But we start this off with the Sex Pistols. No beginner's guide to punk rock could possibly be complete without mentioning the most notorious first-wave UK punk band, the Sex Pistols. Formed in 1975, the Sex Pistols were the brainchild of artist and clothing designer Malcolm McLaren, who had managed the band for the duration of their original incarnation. Originally comprised of vocalist Johnny Rod and guitarist Steve Jones, drummer Paul Cook, and bassist Glenn Matlock, later being replaced by Sid Vicious. Womp womp. The Pistols channeled the raw power of the Stooges into a bombastic, confrontational, and angry wall of overdriven guitars and sneering vocals. I like that description, and I agree with it. Image-wise, the Sex Pistols set the template for punk fashion with ripped clothing precariously held together with safety pins, DIY t-shirt with slogans or profanities spray-painted on them, tight, torn blue jeans, and combat boots. Malcolm McLaren is largely responsible for refining their look, though he also stole many of his punk fashion ideas from Richard Hell while visiting New York City. Ha! That's hilarious. If anyone is to blame for the rotten public image of punk rock in the late 70s and 80s, it is the Sex Pistols. The notorious profanity-laden appearance on Thames Television's Today program with Bill Grundy is the stuff of legend. Unfortunately, it also terrified the UK public and kicked off decades of media hysteria about punk rock violence and its corrupting influence on youngsters. Let's go. Recommended track, No Feelings. Interesting. Is that the one that Rob hated? I can't remember. Dude, it might have been. Interesting. Here's one that's going to get me flamed. I don't... Okay. What's up, Corey? The Saints, the Sonics. I mean, I'm still reading. There's all kinds of bands to talk about still. And there's a lot of bands we're going to miss. I'm not going to be on here for 2 hours. I've got stuff to do today. You guys. I got to listen to Pulley and Propaganda. It is what it is, though. All right, I'm not going to keep reading these comments because then I'll get sidetracked and not do what I'm supposed to do right here. I'm about to get flamed, but the Buzzcocks are who they bring up next, and I stand firm on the Buzzcocks don't look or sound like punk to me at all. They were like a pop band. Maybe they were just like a pop punk band, but I don't know. I listen to them. I don't like the Buzzcocks very much, and I need to like try to get into them more. I hope I can turn around and have to eat some crow on this one. We'll see, though. I don't know. Buzzcocks are an early example of a punk band forming while its members attended the same college, or at least met in college. Pete Shelley and Howard Devoto bonded over a shared interest in the Velvet Underground while attending the Bolton Institute of Technology, and would later pick up instruments and form Buzzcocks. Also an early example of a punk band mixing pop with punk. Buzzcocks wrote songs about boredom, loneliness, teenage romance, masturbation, and alienation. Fuck, they're Green Day, another band that doesn't necessarily fit the template of punk rock. Interesting. So I guess they are just like a fringe pop punk band. I don't know, man. Whatever, dude. Call them punk band. Tell me I'm wrong. I don't give a shit. I'm still gonna tell you they're not a punk band to me. I'm a stubborn old curmudgeony shithead. You guys know that by now, don't you? Yo, come on, Georgie out here agreeing with me. Let's go. Rock and Roll High School movie was in theaters back then. Yeah, isn't that crazy? What I think is crazy is how DIY was really important back then, but they all still really wanted to get on a major label, probably until about Minor Threat, I would think. Maybe Black Flag. I can't remember who was first, but it was early hardcore punk bands who started doing their own labels. I love this stuff, man. I love it, dude. This journey, this story. Look, here's the thing. Whether we all agree on the details or not is almost irrelevant, because I guarantee you we all love this stuff. All of us. And that's why we would argue about it. We would argue about it because it's important to us. We gatekeep things because it's important to us. I think this is an interesting topic, and it's a beautiful story. It's such a wonderful journey to go down these roads and just look at the memories and go back and watch photos. Watch videos and look at photos, listen to music, and be somebody like me who I go back in time and I listen to these bands who I never really cared much for, and I have an appreciation for them now that I didn't used to have, and I'm still like going into these bands that I didn't care about much and learning to like some and rediscovering some that I didn't know, rediscovering bands that I didn't know I was going to like, and then discovering bands that I didn't know much of. So like when I started listening to 70s stuff and I was doing some videos on old punk bands, it just started with me doing a video about street punk stuff. I started talking about 90s street punk. That led to learning about the history of punk, which led me to the history of street punk, which was like oi stuff, which led me to like some garage rock stuff, which led me to bands like the Vibrators and the Boys, which then had me listening to the Damned again and going, oh, I guess I do kind of like this now. It's so crazy, dude. My journey is so weird, and there's no right or wrong way. You either like it or you don't, and you get there when you get there, you know. But it's just a beautiful journey, and I'm so glad to be able to have this channel and to do, to learn, to teach, to grow as a artist myself and a content creator, to, get these opportunities to meet people and go and film shows. Like, dude, Coxbar has been one of my favorite bands since I was a youngster, right? But I didn't know the history of them until recently. It doesn't matter. There's nothing wrong with that. It just is what it is. I just didn't have it in me to go learn. And as a middle-aged person, I want to learn. You know, when I was young, I was too worried about where I was going to eat, sleep, and how I was going to pay my bills. Like, I didn't have any money. I was living in my car, hopping couches a bunch. I lived in a lot of living rooms. Like, I wasn't reading books. I didn't have time for that shit. I moved out at 17, never went back, dude. Like, My journey is interesting. I wish I had the time to sit down and start writing a book. I don't know if anybody would read it, but it'd be cool to have it just exist. But anyways, what's up, BP? I'm glad you guys are here hanging out, man. I wasn't sure anybody was going to show up today. It's pretty neat, man. Thank you guys. Okay. Going back to the Buzzcock stuff. The first single released after signing with United Artists, Orgasmatic examines compulsive sexual urges and is filled with double entendres. It's also much too risque for mainstream appeal. Yeah, probably, especially with the name just being very blatant like that. Unlike many other punk bands at the time, Buzzcocks were competent musicians who quickly evolved after their initially rough and simplistic first release, the Spiral Scratch EP. Later songs would feature complex vocal harmonies and intricately melodic two-guitar interplay that would exert a strong influence on future punk bands like Descendants and Green Day, as well as indie alternative acts like The Smiths and Radiohead. The recommended track from these guys is Boredom. You know what's crazy? I completely forgot about... I did a little bit of research on this band a while back when I was doing some of my earlier videos. Yeah, Cockspar is another founding UK band. They started as more pub rock, but were hugely influential on other UK bands. That's from Georgie. I highly agree with that. As, you know, said as much by Colin and when I interviewed him. What a cool dude that guy is. I had forgotten that they did that Spiral Scratch EP, and that I heard that, and I thought, okay, if they had continued with this, I would have considered them a punk band. But they did that one thing, and then they went and got just really good, like objectively good. And I just wasn't into their stuff after that. But yeah, Spiral Scratch is a good release. I need to shut up about this band and just have my opinions to myself. No, I can't do that. I don't shut up. I'm not good at it. Here we go. The Clash. Although they weren't the first band to mix politics and punk, the Clash were definitely the first to do it with both clarity and style. How else can you describe a band that once billed themselves as the only band that matters? That is grade A punk attitude right there. Did they do that, or did somebody else do that? Did they say that, or did somebody else put them out as that? I think that wasn't them, was it? I think that was somebody else that did that. I wasn't the Clash that said that about themselves. But it says real clearly here, how else can you describe a band that once billed themselves as the only band that matters? I think somebody else did that. Man, correct me if I'm wrong. Was that the Clash doing that? The Clash skillfully merged such genres as rockabilly, funk, ska, reggae, and dub into their sound. The track sequencing on their albums seamlessly blends the diverse mix into a cohesive listening experience, such that it feels perfectly natural for an up-tempo rock song to be followed by the slow groove of funk or reverb-washed dub. Prior to forming the Clash, rhythm guitarist and vocalist Joe Strummer was in a pub rock band called the 101ers. I need to do a video on the 101ers. And at some point realized that it was shallow and that he needed to make more meaningful music. He recruited lead guitarist and vocalist Mick Jones, bassist Paul Simonon, and drummer Nicky Topper Heaton, and set about changing both punk and popular music forever. While the Clash's first two albums, their self-titled debut and follow-up Give 'Em Enough Rope, are near-perfect punk albums, it's their third album, London Calling, that begins their musical experimentation and departure from punk's basic song structures for a synthesis of the aforementioned styles into a universally appealing sound. After London Calling, the Clash were on their way to becoming one of the biggest musical acts of the 1980s, and perhaps even of all time, when drugs and egos again stepped in to ruin a good thing. Despite selling out arenas worldwide and having their progressive political message broadcast on mainstream radio, the Clash broke up in 1985. Their recommended track is Safe European Home. I can't really argue with that. It's a wonderful song. So, one of the things about the Clash is this. Like my journey with the Clash is a strange one too. When I was young, I was into like Rancid, and I went into a record store and I asked them. I said, "Hey, I get told that I need to listen to the Clash because I love this band Rancid. What do you guys got?" And he handed me. I can't remember what order it was in. I feel like it was Combat Rock, and then I went in later and got London Calling. But I started with those two albums. And to this day, I don't like either record. For ages, I would be like, man, Clash does not sound like a punk band to me, because I never heard Give 'Em Enough Rope, and I'd only heard the subtitled album like once or twice and just didn't care for it much. But, you know, I'm an idiot sometimes, and it flipped around, and I heard, I was told by somebody on a live stream that hey, it's funny that you love Rancid so much, but you don't listen to the Clash. And I was like, why would that matter? They don't sound anything alike. And then they went, well, what about Give Them Enough Rope? And I was like, what's that? And then I went and listened to it. Within like 10 seconds of the first track, I was like, oh shit, here we go. Growth, people, growth. Wait, what? Okay. There's a super lag, so I don't know what we're talking about, Mo Tracy. Sorry, dude. What were we just talking about? I don't know. It's all right though. The Damned. I think the Damned have the most. I think the Damned have the best cover of all time. Because when I was young, that cover is so good that when I was like 20, I thought it was like a modern record. I didn't know much about them yet, and I'd only heard a little bit of their music. And it was through my, you know what, I should have known because it was through my friend Steven's dad, and he's an old punker guy. I should have known that that was an old band based on that, but I just, you know. Anyways, the cover with all those guys with like the whatever it is, shaving cream, whipped cream, whatever it is, all over their face. I think it's whipped cream. I think it's pies that they got thrown at them or something. Anyways, that cover is such a great cover, and the photo is so perfect that if you told a kid that's 15 now, hey, look at this new album that just came out, and let them see the cover, it looks like a brand new record. It's so crazy. I love that cover. It just, it's perfect. While the Sex Pistols were the punk band that shocked and horrified the English public, and the Clash were the political consciousness of punk, the Damned were busy having fun and getting on everyone's nerves, including all of the other punks. Despite being the first UK punk band to release a single, New Rose, from October 1976, and full-length album, Damn Damn Damn, in February of 77, the Damned never really captured the same levels of attention or respect as their peers in the Sex Pistols and the Clash. Meanwhile, the Damned's debut album hit listeners with an almost unrelenting barrage of serrated guitars, frenetic drumming, and caustic vocals. It's faster, louder, and more aggressive than the music their better-known counterparts were making at the time, and solidified the Damned's status as one of the progenitors of UK punk rock. To top it all off, the Damned were also the first UK punk band to tour the US. Their spring 1977 appearance at the Mask in Los Angeles is believed to have kicked off the LA punk scene's evolution into what would become known as hardcore punk. That's cool. Recommended track would be New Rose. Dude, New Rose is an emo song, dude. I love it. Okay, I'm sorry, Mo. You have to like remind me what it was that I asked you. And there's this giant lag, so I'll say something, and like a minute and a half later, you respond, and I'm like, "What was I even talking about?" My short-term memory is really, really bad. Sorry. Let's see. Dude, I love my phone, but sometimes the buttons are so small it's hard for me to type on here. Oh, are you referring to like how the punk bands were looking to get on major labels? Anyways, back to what I was talking about. Sorry, Mo. I get this the really long lag. It really messes me up sometimes. Ooh, the X-Ray Specs. I love this band. This album is so good, dude. I didn't even know they had a second album until recently, because I just never heard it. But I listened to it. It was not the same stuff. There's just it says there's just debate about it. The first Riot Girl was Polystyrene of X-Ray Specs. You know, Defiant, snotty, confrontational, and with thick braces on her teeth, Styrene showed the boys that girls can play punk rock just as well or better. Dude, she's one of my favorite vocalists of all time. Like many other youngsters in the UK at the time, Polly Styrene was inspired to form a band after seeing the Sex Pistols live in 1976. Thanks to Styrene's unique vocal style and distinctive outfits, it didn't take long after forming for the X-Ray Specs to become one of the most well-known punk bands in the UK, sharing bills with similar bands like the Buzzcocks, Wire, and Chelsea. Set against a driving punk backdrop, Styrene gleefully sang songs about bondage, identity, apathy, and rampant consumerism. Yup. Often labeled as deliberate underachievers. That's unfortunate. It took 2 years for X-Ray Specs' first and only album, Germ-Free Adolescence, to be released in 1975. X-Ray Specs were also notable for having a saxophone player in the band, which was virtually unheard of at the time in punk rock. They are sometimes lumped in with new wave bands because of this addition to their sound. Recommended track, obviously, Oh Bondage Up Yours. Dude, X-Ray Specs are like literally like one of my favorite. I love. That's one of the. So that's one of the. One of the old, like classic punk bands that I liked as a youngster. I don't know what it was, but when I heard "Oh Bondage Up Yours," I think I went out and bought a cassette tape of Germ-Free Adolescence. My dad gave me some money, and I was at I actually still go to this record store. It's still over by a part of town my mom goes to. It's called Music Town out in I think Klein's what you would call it, Spring, I guess. Shout out Music Town. But yeah, man. Did I have that on vinyl or tape? I might have had it on record. I can't remember. But I used to love that album. Still do. That's bro. I might listen to that today. All right, I'm gonna wrap this up here in a few minutes. The Vibrators, let's go. Hailing from London, the Vibrators were a pub rock band turned punk band that knew how to execute a simple formula to near perfection. They applied the same basic verse-chorus verse structure to practically every song that they recorded, rarely deviating from it for long. Songs like Petrol, You Broke My Heart, and Wrecked on You don't really need much more than a simplistic binary modulation between verse and chorus to stick in listeners' heads. Good grief. The Vibrators were also quite adept at the catchy sing-along choruses, as exemplified by the track Yeah, 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 which became the inspiration for the name of a certain early 2000s post-punk band. You guessed it, the Yeah, Yeah, Yeahs. It could also be said that the Vibrators were likewise adept at inspiring other bands to name themselves after their songs. In addition to the Yeah, Yeah, Yeahs, Belfast's Stiff Little Fingers also took their name from a similarly titled Vibrator song from 1977 debut album Pure Mania. Recommended track, Yeah, Yeah, Yeah. Dun, 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 dun. All right, there's 3 more bands that they mentioned. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I will go to Wire, because Wire's one that I hear a lot about it. I've listened to it, and I just didn't dig it. So I need to go back and check them out again, I think. Within the span of a single release, 1977's Pink Flag, Wire managed to both exemplify and transcend the confines of the newly birthed genre known as punk rock. The group, led by singer-guitarist Colin Newman, toyed with the trappings of punk, all while pushing against its nascent boundaries and twisting its most recognizable features out of all proportion. Punk rock songs were usually short. Wire made them shorter, with most tracks clocking in at under 2 minutes, and a few under 1 minute. Field Day for the Sundays is a mere 28 seconds long. Punk rock had loud guitars at the forefront. Wire made them thunderous, as on the song 12XU, and heavy to the point of all-consuming, as on the title track Pink Flag. Political punk, yeah, Wire has you covered there too. Rooters batters listeners with a depressing future vision of military unrest, culminating in a drawn-out chant of oof, that's crazy, repeated until both the band and listeners are exhausted. Although Wire would quickly abandon almost all punk pretense on their follow-up album 1978's Chairs Missing and go on to spearhead the post-punk movement, Pink Flag is still a near-perfect punk rock time capsule. Okay, I guess their recommended track is X Lion Tamer. I guess I'll go back and revisit this album because I might have listened to multiple records or songs from different records of that band when forming my initial opinion. So, yeah, man, 50 years of this stuff, all kicked off by, the Ramones and the Sex Pistols. It's pretty crazy. Stick of Rock Pub in Bethnal Green. Used to be good. Is the band called Stick of Rock Pub? I've never heard that. That's a crazy ass name. Oh, shit. Oh, that was just... Okay, never mind. Doesn't matter. My chair hates me because I used to be real fat. And it just like... groans and groans and groans. Anyways, man. This is a fun trip down History Road. I love doing this stuff. I'm glad that you guys hang out with me. I know I'm not perfect. I know that there's a bunch of things that I still need to learn. And there's even opinions of mine that'll continue to change and morph. And, you know, I don't get too stuck on that, man. It doesn't bother me if... changing my mind isn't a big deal to me. So, you know, I like what I like, and yeah, I don't like what I don't like. If that changes, it is what it is. People can like it or not. It's okay to dislike me. You don't have to like me. You don't, then don't. 50 years of this stuff, man. The Sex Pistols kicked it off 1975 in November with their first live show. Interesting, man. Well, you'll hear more from me and Nitty later on when we debate this. Yeah, I got other work to do for the channel, so I'm going to get out of here. I need to grab something to eat, say hi to my kids. But I appreciate everybody's time. It's a little bit longer than I planned on going. I read all that stuff. It was kind of difficult. Reading on here live is kind of tough, you know. But I'm not scared of failure, so I'll just give it a try. Yeah, Anti-Nowhere League, pretty good band. Mo Tracy, Jesse, Rogue Archivist, what's up, G? Georgie, BP, everybody that come and hung out with me today. Thank you, Jesse. Hope you're doing good, everybody. Andy Long, Corey Necrotones. Walter was here a little bit. Megan was here for a little while. So whoever came by and hung out, thank you very much for your time and attention. I appreciate that. We'll see you guys later, man. I'll be back on here. I might do a stream tomorrow listening to the new Homefront record just because I love that band and those guys are cool, and I'm seeing them on Sunday.